So responsible AI includes many different activities, and what you see here are one of the top ones. We have trust, fairness and explainability, accountability and compliance. Oh, scrolling way too fast through. Now, what people sometimes forget is actually the value. And it's just like a seesaw. Sometimes it shifts towards the value and sometimes it shifts towards a command and control in terms of doing things responsibly. Now, the idea of an AI strategy is to find that balance between the value of your project and the responsibility that you are taking up. Now, the problem is that you need to keep in mind different dimensions. And to get there, we also have specific key practices. What those dimensions are and what key practices there are there, we will discuss today in this talk. So let's start first with our dimensions. We see and hear from many organizations that they have an AI expert that is already implementing responsible AI. Okay, but that's one person. And then we need to ask ourselves, is that actually enough? Is it enough to give all that responsibility to one person? Will he be able to think about all the different aspects? And that brings us to the different aspects that are there to build a responsible AI solution. We have our AI expert, which might be great in building machine learning models, figuring out fairness, bias in the data, and so on. But there are 4 different dimensions that we need to keep in mind. We have organization, customer or citizen, depending on the project, the society, and the workspace. So we'll go over the 4 different dimensions. The first one, organization. There we will calculate, again, as we said before, the value versus risk. How deep or how how much is value important for us linked to the risk of our project? How transparent do we want to be? But also, do we need to retrain our employees to be able to, first of all, understand what your AI model is doing, but in the meanwhile also accept it? Studies have shown that when your employees don't really get what a system is doing, the usage is also not that high. So if they get it, they will also use it more. So an important part to keep in mind. The second dimension or dilemma is, how does the customer or citizen think about it? Who are you actually building your project for? Let's say you're building an AI model for body cams for the police. Now, as an AI company, you might think, okay, my customer is the police department. But is that the end user of your AI models? Think about it. The AI model is going to make predictions or classifications on the people on the street. So we need to take these people also, their opinions, to know what exactly they think about the AI models that are used on them. The third one is society. Now, we know that there are regularizations already in different countries concerning data usage, privacy, also concerning AI. But they're not always the same. In certain countries, there are almost no privacy laws. In other countries, they are very strict. One country, data security is less important than in others. Now think about building a machine learning model where you have a specific model, and from one country you can only use this part of the data, and from another country you can use all kinds of data. I guess you understand already that your model will not work decently in all the different locations. So society is again important in how you will start training your machine learning model. And then the last but not least is the workspace. How does AI affect the jobs, the employee morale, and also change management? As I said before, within your organization, you need to make sure that your employees want to make use of the machine learning model, and they need to change their behavior towards it. Now, choosing what kind of projects that you actually want to start developing and which ones you don't is also not that easy, because you might have a specific data set. I will just go over a couple of cases where sometimes the use case is okay to do and then others are not. Let's say as an employee or as a citizen, activity monitoring. If it makes me safer, oh, perfectly, please use it. If it helps me to be more productive, not always a fan. But if it's predicting if I'm going to quit, well, that's something that most employees might not be happy that it's used on them. And that's on many different aspects of different data that can be used. Also personal life details. If it's for recommending us a sports club, for example, great. If it's selecting work opportunities for me, again, we might ask ourselves, do we actually want that? Work metrics, if it provides me a performance feedback, if it's just feedback, okay, perfect. But if it will determine my pay, then again, I wouldn't be happy that my work metrics are used to determine my pay if it's done by an AI that sometimes can't be explained. So we have different kinds of data sets, but each data set on itself has different risks. For some use cases you can use it, and for others you can't. And that brings us to a responsible AI organization. What kind of services or groups of people do we actually need to be able to have a responsible AI strategy? Well, what you see here is not a work chart, but this is how it looks in different organizations. It does not mean that every organization has everything. The group responsible for responsible AI, sometimes it extends data analytics, sometimes it extends legal and compliance, and sometimes it's from the business. But this is the umbrella organization. It should be enforced by an AI governance and are sometimes overseen by an AI oversight committee. And then you have AI validators who check if AI is doing what it's supposed to do and to ask questions. Another interesting group is the ethical AI board. and also the AI empathy lab. An AI empathy lab is when you take your data scientists and bring them into the situation where the AI is used on them. An example is, you could say they fit on the shoes of their customers and feel how it is to be in their shoes, as said. Now, of the part we've just discussed, I think there's one highlight that I would like as a takeaway is build an advisory AI board of independent, respected people to resolve AI dilemmas. You might have already noticed before we started with that one AI expert that knows technically perfectly what needs to be done, but all the steps around it, he might not always have all the knowledge about it. So therefore, it's important to have a group of people helping that AI expert. That brings us to our second issue. Not issue, this is actually already linking us to resolutions, and that's key practices that we need to keep in mind to build a responsible AI strategy. The first one is respecting privacy. Now, the problem with a lot of data is that it can be identified to one person, personal identifiers. To be able to fix that, there's different ways of using the data or to encrypt the data. We have differential privacy, where we are grouping our data in specific clusters. Of course, you need to make sure that one person is not alone in one cluster, because then you can still determine who he is. And then we have homomorphic encryption. Homomorphic encryption is a practice where, if we look at it in a mathematical way, is that when we have a value x and a value y, they have a specific value, 20 and 4. Now, as a data scientist, I only see the variables x and y, and I can still do manipulations on it without knowing the exact values behind it. That's homomorphic encryption. And then a third one is synthetic data. Well, that's data that is generated randomly based already on other real data, but where you can't identify anyone in that data anymore. And then there's other types of algorithms to be able to respect the privacy of people. The second part is detect and mitigate bias. Now, bias is finding a balance between your data. And bias is actually the unbalance in your data. For example, we know that AI models are always trained on a particular data set. That can be historical data set for regression models, for example, but also classifications and so on. Now, imagine we want to build a machine learning model that predicts the chance for someone to become a doctor or to finish school as a doctor, medical doctor or not. Now, if we would focus on data from up to the 60s, well, the chances for a man to become a doctor would be way higher compared to a woman, which is not fair, right? Gender should not be part of the if your chances are higher or lower. So there's an unbalance in the data. So that's something we need to figure out and to find the balance in. Now, that's finding a balance within your data, but also within your team. As data scientists, there need to be diversity, because everyone thinks about specific topics in a different way. Therefore, have a good mix in your data science team. Of course, if you have a team that is big enough, you don't need to specifically get more people in your team to be able to do this. But then you can, as we said before, with an AI ethical board or bring more people in together to create a diverse team of different genders, different races, to have the different kinds of opinions about how an AI model should be built. Another part of detecting bias is also by making things explainable. How are you explaining to your customers why a specific decision was made? There was a big organization a couple of years ago that had created a credit card, and there were stories of a couple, man, woman, and they both requested a credit card, and one got more credit than the other, which was not fair. And when they were asking the company why, they were not able to explain it. Of course, that's bad advertisement for them, and I'm sure the couple left and went to another bank to get their credit cards there. That links us also to validation. How are we making sure that our models, once they're in production, that they keep on doing well? Because we might get new data, but that new data might actually change things in your model that you don't want. So you need to add the necessary checks in that. Now, to detect and mitigate bias, there are different kinds of frameworks that can be used. And one of them is the fairness frameworks, where we, for example, have ShapeFiles, the Lime, Microsoft FairLearn, which we have learned about yesterday also, and also Microsoft Responsible AI dashboards, which helps us to understand what our model is doing, what features in our data set are more important, but also figuring out why a specific decision is made by the machine learning model. Now, to also be more transparent, there are services like model cards. What you see here is an example of a model card, which is something that is now also built in an Azure Machine Learning services that can be generated after a machine learning model has been trained. And it gives you an overview of different statistics of your model, which helps if you want to make it public, which is not always, which is a good thing for other people to understand what actually is being done with your data. Next to AI models, it might also be very interesting to keep track of your data set. So what you see here in the picture is a data sheet for data sets. These are examples that you can find on Arxiv. And this will keep track of what is the motivation of using this data. What does the data represent? How much data was there? Was the data labeled? Who labeled it? Who actually paid to generate the data? Because sometimes it's sponsored data and people might not fully trust it. Has the data set been used for other tasks? How is it getting distributed? Is it only for internal usage? You could say it's part of your data governance. And then the third part is building trust and fight bias with explainability. You see here a couple of examples. We have a specific model that we have a specific text, sneezing, weight, headache, no fatigue, age, specific features that the model says, okay, that's the flu. Okay, but why is that the flu? Well, by the explanation, we can understand sneezing, headache, no fatigue, that is linked to the disease flu. Also, the picture underneath, so this was purely on text. We can do that on pictures also. Here we see a Labrador playing a guitar, but we can split up that picture in different parts to understand why we think that this is a well, not why we, but why the machine learning model is thinking that this is a Labrador playing the guitar. Another interesting fact is working with an AI model validator. And you could compare that a bit to a white hat hacker, where a white hat hacker is trying to get into your network, in your local network of your organization. With the AI model validator, we want to do exactly the same. We want someone to try to hack into our machine learning model to figure out if he can pick out or pull out specific personal information, because we don't want that to be leaked, right? Security is also very important within a machine learning model. Then, as said before, we need to extend our data and analytics governance to also AI, where trust, transparency, and diversity is the basis of an ethical foundation. We need to focus on trust to cultivate AI adoption. We need to attain transparency to reduce risks and grow confidence in AI. And we need to seek diversity of data, algorithms, and people to ensure AI value and ethics. And a couple of takeaways for this part was we need to drive carefully. For each use case, designate a champion accountable for the responsible development of that AI. Give responsibility to people. He needs to be accountable for a specific use case. He needs to ask questions. He needs to go around and ask other people, the customers, the citizens, what they think about that kind of algorithm. Ensure that humans are in the loop for mitigating AI deficiencies. Again, once we bring a machine learning model in production, we'll keep on checking that machine learning model is acting well, it's not behaving in a bad way. Choosing wisely, continuously raise awareness of AI difference from the familiar concepts, and have everyone in the process defend their decisions in front of their peers and validators. As we discussed before, one data set can be used in different ways, but we need to make sure that the use cases for that data set are validated, that we've asked the correct questions to the correct people to be able to say, okay, this is a project that we can keep on doing. And with that, I open up for some questions.
Yes, great session.
Thank you.
A lot of things to think about and
Yeah.
to get in place to really get this going.
Exactly. It's responsible AI is so important, and I think there's many organizations who start doing it well, but they need to think about so many different things to be able there. And as I said, a diverse team is already a good start, because just as a single person, you do not always think about everything.
No.
And we also grew up with specific ideas in our mind that we think that's normal, but for other people it might be a totally different way because they grew up in a different culture.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think also for lots of companies, awareness needs to be created, right? Because you start with some data projects. It's for most companies a quite new field, a new area. And then all of a sudden you need to think of all these different things to get it into place in the right way.
I think also it's important as like I'm running a consultancy business, that it's important that you can tell to your customers like that's not a good idea to do. We've had questions from customers like where they want to work with, they were using Office 365 for like everything, so they were able to see everything that was done. It's like why can't we find in like specific combinations that they're doing that we can do it automatically, but therefore you might need to read, for example, their emails or when they're doing calls, and those calls could also be private. So that's dangerous situations that you're reaching into that we all need to keep in mind of.
Yeah. So one question I was thinking about, and what I was, what is the first step that companies need to take when they want to set up this strategy?
If it's specifically is building a team that is not always technical, but a team that can help think how the customer thinks about the project, the customer or the citizen, if it's a governmental or a private organization. I think that's the most important part, because you need to ask questions. And the more questions you have asked, the better.
Yeah. Diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And business and domain knowledge.
Yeah.
Extremely important.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Sammy, for your
problem.
session. And oh, we have a question. Okay. Oh no, it is already answered. The question was, what is one of the major challenges, barriers that you overcame in your journey?
To responsible AI.
Yeah.
I think that's for every data scientist, is to understand it, because there's so many different things you need to think about. And again, that's why diversity is very important, to have those people around you who also think differently than you, and to bring all that information together before you make a decision. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question, Fernando.
Okay, and there is another question. Yeah. I have not tried all of this. SHAP, Lime, Fairlearn, AI dashboard. How different are these?
Yeah. So the Fairlearn was separately in the Azure ML Studio, but now it's all part of the Responsible AI dashboard. SHAP and Lime are actually machine learning, packages in Python. I don't know if they're available in R. I'm for sure in Python, that you can implement. And for example, when you do a prediction, it will return you a data set with the features and their how important they were to get to that prediction.
Yeah. Okay. Those were all the questions.
Yeah, it was great questions.
Yeah, for sure. So we will go out for a small break, and afterwards we will continue with the next section. So we see you in a bit.